The massive crystal hall stretched beyond what most beings could see. Hundreds of alien representatives filled the space, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, hums, and electronic sounds. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension as the Galactic Council prepared for the most important meeting in their history. Captain Marcus Webb sat alone in the back corner, his simple uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate clothing and natural features of the other delegates. His weathered hands rested calmly on the table as he watched the proceedings unfold. The human delegation consisted of only 3 people, barely noticed among the thousands of aliens present. At the center of the hall, High Chancellor Vorth rose to address the assembly. The Altarian's crystalline body caught the light from a dozen suns, casting rainbow patterns across the chamber. His voice resonated through built-in speakers, translating into hundreds of languages simultaneously. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," Vorth began, his tone carrying the weight of authority, earned through millennia of leadership. "The hegemony has destroyed 17 star systems in the past cycle. Their fleet grows stronger with each victory. We must act now or face extinction." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The hegemony had become the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. Their technology adapted to every defense. Their ships seemed immune to conventional weapons, and their expansion showed no signs of slowing. Commander Thix of the Hive Lord stepped forward, her insectoid form clicking as she moved. "The Collective offers 1 million bioships for this alliance. Our swarm tactics have proven effective against smaller hegemony forces." The Nebulan representative, a gaseous being contained within a shimmering field, spoke next. "Our phase shift technology allows us to strike from dimensions the hegemony cannot reach. We pledge our entire fleet to this cause." One by one, the major powers of the galaxy announced their contributions. The Altarians offered their energy weapons, capable of destroying planets with focused light beams. The mechanoids promised their self-repairing ships that could continue fighting even after catastrophic damage. The psionics spoke of mind control, techniques that could turn enemy forces against themselves. As the announcements continued, Marcus noticed that humanity had not been called upon to speak. He cleared his throat and stood, his movement drawing curious glances from nearby delegates. "If I may," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber despite lacking any technological amplification. "The Terran Federation would like to contribute to this alliance." The hall fell silent for a moment before scattered laughter began to echo through the space. High Chancellor Vorth's crystalline features shifted into what might have been amusement. "Captain Webb," Vorth said, his tone patronizing, "we appreciate your species' enthusiasm, but this is a matter of galactic security. The hegemony possesses technology that rivals our most advanced civilizations." Marcus remained standing, his expression calm. "We understand the threat, Chancellor. Humanity requests permission to join the main battle fleet." The laughter grew louder. Commander Thix clicked her mandibles in what the translator rendered as mirth. "Your species achieved faster than light travel less than 2 centuries ago. You fight with metal projectiles and chemical explosives. This is no place for primitive weapons. Your ships are constructed from basic alloys," added the Nebulan representative. "Your energy output is barely sufficient for interstellar travel. How could you possibly contribute to a conflict of this magnitude?" Marcus looked around the chamber, meeting the gazes of beings who had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. Their technology was indeed far beyond anything humanity possessed. Their ships could manipulate matter at the quantum level, bend space-time, and harness the power of stars themselves. "We may not have your advanced technology," Marcus replied. But we have experience fighting wars." This statement caused even more laughter. The Altarian delegation consulted among themselves before Vorth spoke again. "Captain Webb, your species has been at peace for nearly 50 years. The last major conflict Earth experienced was centuries ago. Meanwhile, we have been defending this galaxy against threats you cannot imagine." Marcus nodded slowly. "You're right about our recent peace. But humanity has been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've developed strategies and tactics that might prove useful. The mechanoid representative, a being of living metal, stepped forward. Our analysis of human military history shows constant internal conflict. Your species fights itself rather than external threats. This demonstrates a lack of unity that would prove fatal against the hegemony. Furthermore, added Commander Thix, your weapons technology is based on crude kinetic force. The hegemony's shields can absorb energy attacks. That would vaporize planets? Your metal projectiles would be useless. Marcus accepted these criticisms without argument. Everything they said was true from their perspective. Humanity's technology was primitive compared to these ancient civilizations. Their ships were slower, their weapons less powerful, their shields weaker. High Chancellor Vorth consulted with his advisors before making his decision. The Galactic Council appreciates humanity's offer of assistance. However, we cannot risk placing inexperienced forces in critical positions. We will assign the Terran Federation to auxiliary duties. The hall erupted in approving sounds from dozens of species. Marcus felt his jaw tighten slightly, but his expression remained neutral. What exactly do you mean by auxiliary duties? He asked. Supply runs, evacuation assistance, medical support, Vorth explained. Essential functions that will keep you safely away from direct combat. Your ships will be positioned in the rear sectors well behind the main battle lines. Marcus nodded. Once, I understand. We accept the assignment. As the meeting continued, the various alien species began dividing command positions among themselves. The Altarians would lead the energy weapons division. The Hive Lords would coordinate swarm tactics. The Nebulans would handle stealth operations. Humanity was relegated to a footnote in the battle plans. When the session finally ended, Marcus walked slowly back to his shuttle. His aide, Lieutenant Commander Eva Torres, fell into step beside him. Sir, she said quietly, they're making a mistake dismissing us like this. Marcus looked out at the massive alien ships filling the space around the council station. Bioships that pulsed with living light. Crystal vessels that seemed to bend reality around them. Mechanical constructs that rebuilt themselves even as he watched. Maybe they are, he replied, but we have our orders. Prepare the fleet for auxiliary duty. As their shuttle departed, Marcus wondered if the galaxy's most advanced civilizations were about to learn a lesson that humanity had known for millennia. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you underestimate. Behind them, the alien fleets began their preparations for war, confident in their superiority and certain of their victory. None of them noticed the small human battleship that would soon change everything. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council meeting, and the war had begun in earnest. The hegemony fleet, led by the notorious War Master Krex, moved through space like a dark tide consuming everything in its path. Their ships were massive. Angular constructs that seemed to absorb light itself, making them appear as holes in the fabric of space. Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching the tactical displays with growing concern. His ship was stationed 3 systems away from the main battle, officially assigned to protect supply convoys and evacuate civilians from threatened worlds. The work was important, but Marcus knew his crew was capable of much more. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Torres reported from her station, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the Arcturus system. The Coalition fleet is engaging the hegemony forces now. Marcus nodded grimly. The first major battle of the war was about to begin, and humanity could only watch from the sidelines. The aliens had been so confident in their superiority, so certain, that their advanced technology would easily defeat the hegemony threat. The initial reports were encouraging. High Chancellor Vorth's flagship, the Crystal Spear, led a formation of 50 Altarian vessels into battle. Their energy weapons lit up space with brilliant beams of concentrated light, each shot containing enough power to destroy a moon. The Hive Lords followed with their bioships, a swarm of living vessels that moved with organic precision. Sir, the communications officer called out, we're getting real-time battle reports from the Coalition Command. Marcus authorized the transmission, and his bridge filled with the sounds of combat. Vorth's voice came through clearly, filled with confidence and authority. All units, commence primary attack sequence. Target the hegemony flagship with concentrated energy bursts. Their shields cannot withstand our combined firepower. The bridge crew of the Indomitable listened intently as the battle unfolded. For the first few minutes, everything seemed to go according to plan. The coalition forces maintained their formations, their weapon systems functioning perfectly, their commanders coordinating with practiced efficiency. Then something changed. What's happening? Vorth's voice crackled through the comm system, the confidence replaced by confusion. Our weapons are having no effect. The hegemony ships are adapting to our energy frequencies. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The hegemony's reputation for technological adaptation was well known, but seeing it in action was something else entirely. Within minutes of the first energy weapon strikes, the enemy ships had modified their defenses to render the attacks useless. Units switched to secondary weapon systems, Commander Thix ordered, her translated voice sharp with urgency. Deploy bioweapons and organic acids. They cannot adapt to living organisms. The Hive Lords launched their biological assault, sending clouds of engineered organisms toward the hegemony fleet. These creatures were designed to eat through hull plating, disrupt electronic systems, and reproduce rapidly inside enemy ships. They had been devastatingly effective against every opponent the Hive Lords had ever faced. The relief was short-lived. Within hours, the hegemony ships began releasing countermeasures. Viral agents that destroyed the bioweapons, electromagnetic pulses that sterilized entire sections of space, and quantum fields that prevented organic matter from functioning. Impossible, Thix's voice came through the comm, filled with disbelief. They're neutralizing our organisms faster than we can deploy them. The Nebulan forces tried next, using their phase shift technology to attack from parallel dimensions. Their ships flickered in and out of reality, striking at the hegemony fleet from angles that should have been impossible to defend against. Marcus watched the tactical display. As the Nebulan vessels appeared behind enemy lines, their exotic weapons, tearing through what should have been unprotected rear sections. For a moment, it looked like the tide might turn, then the hegemony ships began deploying containment fields, massive energy barriers that stretched across multiple dimensions, trapping the Nebulan vessels in their phase-shifted state, unable to return to normal space. The trapped ships became sitting targets for the enemy's weapons. "Mayday, mayday," came a desperate transmission from the Nebulan fleet commander. "We are trapped in dimensional prison. Request immediate assistance." One by one, the coalition's advantages were neutralized. The mechanoid's self-repairing ships were destroyed by weapons that prevented molecular reconstruction. The psionics, mind-controlled techniques were blocked by synthetic minds that couldn't be influenced. Each species' greatest strength became useless against an enemy that could adapt to anything. "Sir," Torres reported, her voice tense, "the coalition fleet is in full retreat. They're reporting massive casualties across all fronts." Marcus studied the tactical display, watching as the scattered remains of the galaxy's greatest military force fled in disorder. The hegemony had achieved in hours what many thought would take years. Their adaptation technology was beyond anything the coalition had imagined. "Captain," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a priority transmission from High Chancellor Vorth." The main screen flickered to life, showing Vorth's crystalline features marred by cracks and damage. His ship's bridge was filled with smoke and sparks, and his voice carried the weight of defeat. "This is High Chancellor Vorth to all coalition forces," he began, his once proud tone now hollow. "The hegemony's technology is beyond our calculations. They adapt to our weapons faster than we can modify them. All forces are to retreat to defensive positions around the core worlds." Marcus felt his hands tighten into fists. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations, with their energy weapons and exotic technologies, had been defeated in a single engagement. The hegemony was now free to advance toward the inhabited systems, where billions of lives hung in the balance. "What are your orders, Captain?" Torres asked quietly. Marcus looked at his crew, men and women who had volunteered for a mission that kept them away from the real fighting. They had watched their allies suffer a catastrophic defeat while they remained safely in the rear, protecting supply convoys and evacuating civilians. "Sir," the helmsman reported, "we're receiving evacuation orders from Coalition Command. We're to proceed to the inner systems and assist with civilian transport." Marcus nodded slowly, then walked to the tactical station. The display showed the hegemony fleet regrouping after their victory, preparing to advance toward the core worlds. In a few days they would reach systems containing trillions of inhabitants. "Captain," Torres said, stepping closer, "we could reach the battle zone in 6 hours if we push the engines to maximum." Marcus looked at her, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. The coalition had failed because they had fought the hegemony using predictable tactics and familiar technology. Every species had relied on their greatest strengths, making them easy targets for adaptation. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're getting reports from the other auxiliary units. They're all following orders to evacuate civilians." From the threatened systems, Marcus turned to face his crew. These were people who had joined the Navy to protect humanity and its allies, not to run transport missions while others fought and died. They had been dismissed by the Council, relegated to safe duties because their technology was considered primitive. "Helmsman," Marcus said quietly, "set course for the Arcturus system." "Maximum burn." The bridge fell silent. Torres raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. The helmsman hesitated at his controls. "Sir," he said carefully, "that's directly into the combat zone. Our orders are to maintain position in the rear sectors." Marcus walked to the center of the bridge, looking out at the stars through the main viewport. Somewhere out there, the hegemony was preparing to destroy everything the galaxy had built over millions of years. The advanced civilizations had failed, their superior technology proving useless against an enemy that could adapt to anything. "I know exactly where it is," Marcus replied, "and I know exactly what we're going to do when we get there." War Master Krex stood motionless on the bridge of his flagship, the Devastator, surveying the aftermath of the Coalition's defeat. The massive command center stretched out before him, filled with the quiet efficiency of his crew as they processed the battle data. Holographic displays showed the scattered remains of the alien fleet. Their once mighty vessels now nothing more than debris floating in the void. The Damari commander was tall even by his species standards, his dark exoskeleton marked with the scars of countless victories. His forearms moved with precise coordination as he manipulated the tactical displays, analyzing every aspect of the engagement. This was how the hegemony had conquered 17 galaxies, through careful study and ruthless adaptation. "Report," Krex commanded, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. His tactical officer, a synthetic being designed specifically for warfare, approached with data tablets in hand. The energy-based weapons of the crystalline species were neutralized within the first exchange. Our adaptive shielding modified its frequency response in real time, rendering their attacks ineffective. Krex nodded approvingly. The Altarians had been the Coalition's strongest force, their energy weapons capable of destroying entire planets. But like all civilizations that relied on a single technological advantage, they had become predictable. The hegemony's computers had analyzed their weapon signatures and created perfect countermeasures. The biological weapons from the insectoid swarm were equally simple to defeat, the tactical officer continued. Our viral countermeasures eliminated their organisms before they could establish a foothold on our ships. And the phase-shifting species? Contained within dimensional barriers. Their technology requires them to exist partially outside normal spacetime, making them vulnerable to quantum field manipulation. Krex allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Each alien species had fought according to their nature, using the same tactics and technologies that had made them successful against previous enemies. The hegemony's adaptive systems had turned their greatest strengths into fatal weaknesses. "Casualties?" he asked. "Minimal. 7 ships suffered minor damage, all already repaired by our automated systems." The bridge fell silent as the crew processed this information. An entire galactic coalition representing the combined military might of dozens of civilizations had been defeated with almost no losses to the hegemony. It was a victory that would be remembered throughout their empire's history. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, breaking the silence. "We have a single ship approaching from the outer rim. It's not matching any known configuration in our databases." Krex turned his attention to the main display, where a new contact was appearing on the tactical screen. The vessel was significantly smaller than the alien dreadnoughts they had just destroyed, its design simple and functional. Unlike the flowing curves of bioships or the crystalline structures of energy vessels, this craft appeared to be built from basic metal plates welded together. Distance and approach vector? 6 light hours out, approaching on a direct intercept course. The ship appears to be constructed from primitive materials, primarily iron and carbon-based alloys. Krex studied the readings with growing curiosity. The ship's energy signature was almost laughably weak compared to the hegemony's advanced power systems. Its propulsion appeared to be based on simple fusion reactions, barely adequate for interstellar travel. Identification? Unknown, sir. The ship is transmitting on basic electromagnetic frequencies. The message is being decoded now. The main screen flickered as the transmission was processed. Text appeared in simple, unadorned letters. "This is Captain Marcus Webb of the United Earth ship Indomitable. You are ordered to cease hostilities and withdraw from this system immediately." The bridge fell completely silent. Krex stared at the message, processing what he had just read. A single ship from a species not even represented in their intelligence files was ordering the entire hegemony fleet to withdraw. The silence was broken by the sound of laughter from one of the junior officers. Soon, the entire bridge was filled with the harsh sounds of Domari amusement. Even the synthetic beings seemed to find the situation amusing, their processors calculating the humor in such an absurd demand. "Earth," Krex said, accessing the ship's database. "Run a search for any references to this species." The results were disappointing. Earth was listed as a minor world on the galactic rim, inhabited by a species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Their technology was primitive, their military weak, their influence negligible. They had been dismissed by the Galactic Council as too insignificant to warrant attention. "How many ships do they have in this system?" Krex asked. "Just the one, sir. Long-range sensors show no other vessels within 3 light years." Krex felt a mixture of amusement and irritation. The greatest military alliance in galactic history had fled in terror, but this single primitive ship had the audacity to issue demands. It was either the height of courage or the depth of stupidity. "War Master," the communications officer reported. "The human vessel is requesting direct communication with our commander." Krex considered the request. Protocol demanded that he destroy the ship immediately and continue the advance toward the core worlds. But something about the situation intrigued him. What could possibly drive a species to face the hegemony alone? "Put them through," he decided. "I want to hear what this primitive has to say." The main screen shifted to show the interior of the human ship. The bridge was cramped and functional, filled with basic control panels and simple displays. Standing in the center was a human male, his uniform marking him as the captain. Unlike the panicked alien commanders Krex had faced, this being showed no fear, no desperation. "I am War Master Krex of the Hegemony," he began, his voice carrying the weight of countless victories. "You command a single vessel against my fleet of 200 ships. Your allies have fled or been destroyed. Surrender now, and I will grant you a swift death." The human captain looked directly at the camera, his expression calm and professional. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to have to decline. You have exactly 5 minutes to begin your withdrawal, or we will open fire." The bridge erupted in laughter again, but Krex raised one of his hands for silence. There was something in this human's manner that gave him pause. The being showed no signs of fear or madness, only a quiet confidence that spoke of hidden knowledge. "You intrigue me, Captain," Krex said, leaning forward. What makes you believe a single primitive vessel can succeed where entire fleets have failed? The human glanced at something off-screen, then returned his attention to the communication. Because, War Master, you've been fighting aliens. You've adapted to their energy weapons, their biotechnology, their exotic physics. But you've never fought humans. Krex felt a flicker of uncertainty. His species had encountered thousands of different civilizations, each with their own technological approaches. They had faced energy manipulators, biological adapters, dimensional shifters, and synthetic minds. What could these humans possibly possess that would be different? And what makes humans so special? He asked. For the first time, the human captain allowed himself a small smile. We're too stubborn to know when we're beaten, and we've been preparing for this fight a lot longer than you think. Their communication cut out, leaving Krex staring at a blank screen. The bridge had fallen silent again, but this time the silence was different. Something about the human certainty had affected the crew, creating an atmosphere of unease. War Master, his tactical officer reported, the human ship is moving into attack position. They're actually going to fight. Krex turned to watch the tactical display as the single human vessel advanced toward his massive fleet. The Indomitable appeared tiny against the backdrop of hegemony dreadnoughts, like a small predator facing a herd of giants. But something in its approach, steady and purposeful and unafraid, sent an unfamiliar sensation through his consciousness. All ships, he ordered, prepare for engagement. I want a full analysis of their weapons and defenses. These humans seem to believe they have something we haven't seen before. As the crew prepared for battle, Krex found himself wondering what lesson this primitive species thought they could teach the masters of adaptation. The 5 minutes passed in tense silence aboard the Devastator. War Master Krex stood at the center of his bridge, watching as the human ship continued its steady approach. The Indomitable showed no signs of wavering, no indication that its captain would reconsider his impossible position. Time's up, War Master, the tactical officer reported. The human vessel is now within weapons range. Krex nodded slowly. He had given the human captain every opportunity to surrender, more courtesy than he had shown to any previous enemy. But the primitive species seemed determined to fight, regardless of the obvious futility of their situation. All weapons target the human ship, he commanded. I want to see what they're capable of before we destroy them. The hegemony fleet responded with practiced efficiency. Energy beams lanced through space, concentrated fire from a dozen ships converging on the single human vessel. The display showed the incoming attacks as brilliant lines of destruction, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a small moon. Then something unexpected happened. The human ship didn't try to dodge or deploy energy shields. Instead, it simply absorbed the attacks, its thick metal hull glowing white-hot but holding together. The primitive armor plating, which had seemed so crude compared to advanced defensive systems, proved remarkably effective against directed energy weapons. Impossible. The tactical officer muttered, checking his readings. Their hull is constructed from basic steel alloys. It should have been vaporized instantly. Krex frowned as he studied the data. The human ship's armor was indeed primitive, but it was also incredibly thick. Rather than relying on sophisticated energy shields that could be adapted to, they had simply built their vessel to absorb punishment through brute force. Sir, the weapons officer reported, the human ship is returning fire. The Indomitable's weapons systems came online, and Krex felt his first moment of genuine surprise. The human ship wasn't using energy weapons at all. Instead, it was launching physical projectiles, chunks of metal accelerated to incredible velocities by electromagnetic rails. Kinetic weapons, he said, almost to himself. They're using kinetic weapons. The projectiles struck the nearest hegemony vessels with devastating effect. The adaptive shields, designed to counter energy attacks, were useless against simple mass moving at high velocity. The metal slugs punched through hull plating, causing massive decompression and structural damage. Shields are ineffective against kinetic bombardment, the tactical officer reported, his voice showing the first signs of concern. 3 ships report significant damage. Krex felt a chill of recognition. The hegemony's entire defensive philosophy was based on adaptation and energy manipulation. Their ships were designed to counter sophisticated attacks, not crude projectiles hurled with primitive force. Adjust shield frequencies to deflect kinetic attacks, he ordered. Sir, our shields don't function that way. They're designed to absorb and redirect energy, not physical matter. The human ship continued its relentless advance, its weapon systems firing continuously. But Krex noticed something even more disturbing than the effectiveness of their attacks. Each salvo was different from the last. The projectiles varied in size, composition, and velocity, as if the humans were systematically testing the hegemony's defenses. War Master, the sensor operator called out, we're detecting massive electromagnetic activity from the human ship. Their computer systems are working at maximum capacity. Krex studied the readings and realized the truth. The humans weren't just attacking randomly. They were gathering data, analyzing the results of each shot, and modifying their approach in real time. But this wasn't the work of advanced computers or synthetic minds. This was biological intelligence operating at a speed and efficiency that seemed impossible. They're learning, he whispered, the full implications hitting him like a physical blow. They're adapting. The revelation was staggering. The hegemony's entire advantage was based on their ability to adapt faster than their enemies. Their synthetic minds could process information and modify their systems in minutes, while biological intelligences required hours or days to adjust their tactics. But this human ship was adapting even faster than the hegemony. How is this possible? The tactical officer asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Krex watched as the Indomitable's weapon systems began firing specialized projectiles, designed to counter specific types of hegemony vessels. Tungsten penetrators that sliced through energy shields, explosive charges that fragmented into thousands of smaller projectiles, electromagnetic pulse warheads that disrupted synthetic minds. They're not using computers, he realized. They're thinking. The human ship punched through the hegemony's outer perimeter, its weapons now firing with deadly precision. Each shot was carefully calculated to exploit weaknesses that the humans had identified through direct observation. They weren't relying on databases or predictive algorithms. They were learning through experience and intuition. War Master, the communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from the human ship. Captain Webb's face appeared on the screen again, but this time he was standing in what appeared to be a combat command center. His crew moved with practiced efficiency around him, calling out targeting data and tactical information. This is Captain Webb to all remaining Coalition forces, he announced. We've identified the hegemony's weakness. They can adapt to predictable technology, but they can't adapt to creative thinking, break formation, and engage at will. Krex felt his confidence cracking as he watched the human captain coordinate his attack. The primitive vessel was now surrounded by hegemony ships, but instead of being overwhelmed, it was systematically destroying them one by one. Sir, the tactical officer reported, the human ship is using our own tactics against us. They're adapting to our adaptations. The Indomitable's latest salvo consisted of projectiles that changed their properties mid-flight. Metal slugs that separated into multiple warheads, explosive charges that detonated at precisely calculated intervals, and electromagnetic pulses that shifted frequencies to avoid countermeasures. This is impossible, Krex said, his voice barely above a whisper. No biological intelligence should be capable of this level of tactical adaptation. War Master, the sensor operator called out, we're detecting additional ships approaching. From the outer system, the scattered coalition forces are regrouping. The tactical display showed the remaining alien ships emerging from their hiding places, inspired by the human example. But they were no longer fighting with their sophisticated weapons and predictable tactics. Instead, they were attacking with desperate creativity. Using whatever methods they could improvise, an Altarian ship began firing its energy weapons in random patterns, making it impossible for the hegemony to predict and counter the attacks. A Hive Lord bioship released its organisms in chaotic swarms, overwhelming the enemy's countermeasures through sheer unpredictability. A Nebulan vessel phased in and out of reality at irregular intervals, striking from unexpected angles. "They're fighting like primitives," the tactical officer observed. His voice filled with disgust. Krex realized the truth with growing horror. The coalition forces were abandoning their technological advantages and fighting like the humans. They were using intuition instead of calculation, creativity instead of programming, and chaos instead of order. "Sir," the weapons officer reported, "our adaptive systems are failing. We can't counter attacks that have no logical pattern." The human ship continued its devastating assault, each shot perfectly calculated to exploit the hegemony's technological blind spots. Krex watched in fascination as the primitive vessel systematically dismantled his fleet's defenses, using nothing more advanced than metal projectiles and creative thinking. "War Master," the communications officer said urgently, "the human captain is requesting direct communication." Krex nodded, feeling a mixture of respect and dread. He had underestimated these humans, dismissed them as primitive and weak. But they had accomplished something that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had failed to achieve. They had found a way to fight the hegemony and win. Captain Webb's face appeared on the screen one final time, his expression calm but determined. "This is your last warning, War Master. Surrender now, or we will destroy your entire fleet." Krex looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. For the first time in his career, he saw fear in their eyes. The masters of adaptation had been out-adapted by a species they had considered beneath notice. "Captain Webb," he said slowly, "I believe we have something to discuss." The final battle began not with the expected surrender, but with War Master Krex's desperate attempt to salvage victory from the jaws of defeat. Despite his growing respect for the human captain, the Damari commander could not simply abandon his mission. Too much was at stake, too many worlds depended on the hegemony's expansion. "All ships, concentrate fire on the human vessel," Krex ordered, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of conquest. "Whatever technology they possess, they are still only one ship against our entire fleet." The remaining hegemony vessels responded with everything they had. Energy beams, particle cannons, gravitational weapons, and exotic matter disruptors all focused on the Indomitable. Space itself seemed to bend and twist under the assault, reality warping around the concentrated firepower. Captain Marcus Webb stood calmly on his bridge as the attack struck his ship. The Indomitable shuddered and groaned, its thick armor plating glowing white-hot from the energy bombardment. Sparks flew from overloaded systems, and the lights flickered as power conduits strained under the load. "Damage report," Marcus called out, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Hull integrity at 60%, Torres reported from her station. "Armor is holding, but we can't take much more of this." Marcus nodded, studying the tactical display. The hegemony ships were surrounding them, trying to overwhelm the Indomitable through sheer firepower. It was a sound strategy, one that had worked against countless enemies throughout their history. "All weapons, continuous fire," he ordered. "Target their command ships first." The Indomitable's guns roared to life, sending streams of kinetic projectiles into the enemy formation. But these weren't the simple metal slugs that had started the battle. Marcus's crew had been busy during the engagement, modifying their ammunition to counter specific threats. Armor-piercing rounds punched through the hegemony's hull plating. Fragmentation warheads exploded into clouds of high-velocity shrapnel. Electromagnetic pulse shells disrupted enemy systems, causing temporary blindness and confusion. "Sir," the weapons officer reported, "we're running low on specialized ammunition. Standard rounds only at this point." Marcus felt a moment of concern. The Indomitable had been designed for extended combat, but not against an entire fleet. Their supplies were finite, and the enemy seemed to have unlimited resources. "Captain," Torres said quietly, "we're receiving transmissions from the coalition forces. They're requesting orders." Marcus looked at the tactical display, where the scattered remains of the Galactic Alliance were slowly regrouping. The alien ships had been inspired by humanity's example, but they were still confused and disorganized. They needed leadership, guidance, and hope. "Open a channel to all coalition forces," he commanded. The communications officer nodded, and Marcus found himself addressing the greatest military alliance in galactic history. Ships from dozens of species representing millions of years of technological development, all waiting for orders from a primitive human captain. "This is Captain Webb to all allied ships," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chaos of battle. "The hegemony's advantage is their ability to adapt to predictable attacks, but they can't adapt to something they can't understand." He paused, watching as an Altarian vessel took a direct hit from a hegemony dreadnought. The crystalline ship's shields flared and died, leaving it vulnerable to follow-up attacks. "Abandon your standard tactics," Marcus continued. "Stop fighting like machines and start fighting like living beings. Use your instincts, your creativity, your ability to think in ways no computer can predict." The effect was immediate. Across the battlefield, alien vessels began changing their approach. The Altarians stopped firing their energy weapons in precise patterns, instead releasing chaotic bursts of light that overwhelmed the hegemony's adaptive shields. The Hive Lords abandoned their swarm formations, sending their bioships in seemingly random directions that confused enemy targeting systems. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "the coalition forces are following your lead. They're attacking without any recognizable pattern?" Marcus nodded, feeling a surge of pride. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations were learning to fight like humans, using intuition and creativity instead of cold calculation. It was a lesson that humanity had learned through millennia of warfare against their own kind. "War Master, Krex is requesting communication," the communications officer announced. Marcus authorized the transmission, and the Damari commander's face appeared on the main screen. For the first time since the battle began, Krex looked uncertain, his forearms moving in what might have been gestures of confusion. "Captain Webb," Krex said, his voice carrying a mixture of respect and frustration, "your tactics make no sense. You're fighting without strategy, without logic, without any recognizable pattern." Marcus smiled grimly. "That's exactly the point, War Master. You've spent so long fighting civilized enemies that you've forgotten what war really is." "And what is war, in your opinion?" "Chaos," Marcus replied simply. "War is chaos, and the side that can thrive in chaos is the side that wins." The transmission cut out, and Marcus turned his attention back to the battle. The Indomitable was now surrounded by hegemony ships, but the enemy's coordinated attack was falling apart. The coalition forces were pressing their advantage, striking at vulnerable points with unpredictable tactics. "Captain," Torres reported, "we're detecting massive structural damage to the hegemony flagship. The Devastator is losing power." Marcus watched as the enemy command ship began to drift, its weapon systems failing one by one. The hegemony's adaptive technology, so effective against predictable attacks, was useless against the creative chaos of desperate beings fighting for their lives. "Sir," the weapons officer called out, "we have a clear shot at the Devastator's command section." Marcus hesitated for a moment. One shot could end the battle, destroy the enemy commander, and break the hegemony's will to fight. But killing Krex would also eliminate any chance of understanding the enemy, of learning from this encounter. "Load a standard kinetic round," he ordered. "Target their main reactor." The Indomitable's primary railgun charged up, its electromagnetic coils building energy for the final shot. The round was simple, nothing more than a dense metal slug accelerated to incredible velocity. No exotic materials, no advanced technology. Just human engineering and determination. The projectile struck the Devastator's reactor compartment with devastating effect. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star, and the massive hegemony flagship began to break apart. Secondary explosions rippled through the vessel as internal systems failed in cascade. "War Master Krex is evacuating to an escape pod," the sensor operator reported. "The Devastator is destroyed." Marcus nodded, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The battle was won, but at a terrible cost. Ships from both sides littered the space around them, and thousands of beings had died in the conflict. All hegemony vessels, this is Captain Webb, he announced on an open channel. Your flagship is destroyed, your commander defeated. Surrender now, and we will treat your crews with honor. The response was immediate. One by one, the surviving hegemony ships powered down their weapons and began broadcasting surrender signals. The great fleet that had conquered 17 galaxies was broken, defeated by a coalition of species they had considered primitive. Sir, Torres said quietly, we're receiving congratulations from High Chancellor Vorth. The coalition forces are requesting permission to return to their home systems. Marcus looked out at the stars, thinking about what had just happened. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had learned a valuable lesson about the nature of warfare. Technology and adaptation were important, but they were no match for the creative chaos of beings fighting for their survival. Grant permission, he said, and send a message to Earth Command. Tell them that humanity has found its place in the galaxy. As the various alien fleets began their journey home, Marcus remained on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the stars and thinking about the future. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again, but more importantly, humanity had proven to itself that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from superior technology, but from the refusal to surrender in the face of impossible odds. The age of human expansion into the galaxy had begun, built on the foundation of a single battleship that had dared to fight when all others had fled. And in the years to come, other species would learn that while humans might not have the most advanced technology, they had something far more dangerous: the ability to adapt, improvise, and overcome any obstacle through sheer determination and creative thinking. The battle was over, but the legend of humanity's first great victory would inspire generations of explorers, soldiers, and dreamers who would carry the human spirit to the farthest reaches of the galaxy.